Some people are not broke because they lack money. They are broke because they are addicted to appearances. Addicted to looking successful, looking expensive, looking important, looking wealthy, even when internally their financial life is collapsing quietly. Let's slow this down. There are people listening to this right now who are carrying silent financial pressure. Pressure from debt, lifestyle expectations, social comparison, emotional spending, trying to impress people, maintaining an image they cannot truly afford. And deep down, they are exhausted. Most people do not spend money logically. They spend emotionally. Emotionally trying to feel valuable, feel respected, feel important, feel admired, feel successful. And because of that, many people are secretly buying validation instead of building wealth. There is something psychologically dangerous about needing your life to look expensive. Because once appearances become identity, financial self-destruction begins quietly. Some people would rather look rich than become financially free. That sentence alone explains millions of lives. The dangerous thing about fake wealth is that it often looks impressive externally. Nice clothes, luxury lifestyle, expensive habits, designer labels, social media validation. But internally, there is anxiety, debt, pressure, insecurity, silent panic. And eventually, the image becomes a prison. Social media changed people psychologically. Now people feel pressure to look successful early, to perform wealth publicly, to display luxury constantly, to appear ahead in life, even when financially they are drowning quietly. There are people listening to this right now who buy things they do not truly need to impress people they do not even fully like, and deep down, they know it. The need to look successful often comes from emotional insecurity, because many people secretly believe if I look successful, people will finally respect me. But external appearance cannot heal internal insecurity. Most people are not financially trapped only because of income. They are trapped because of emotional spending, status addiction, comparison, lifestyle pressure, lack of discipline. And repeated emotional spending destroys financial freedom slowly. There is something emotionally exhausting about constantly performing success. Performing happiness, luxury, confidence, wealth, while internally carrying stress, debt, pressure, fear. That emotional contradiction destroys peace deeply. The strongest wealthy people often move quietly. Quietly because real wealth does not need constant validation. But financially insecure people often feel pressure to prove success externally. That pressure becomes expensive. Some people are not buying products. They are buying identity. Buying status, attention, validation, admiration, emotional escape, and companies understand this psychology deeply. Modern culture rewards appearances, not discipline, not patience, not long-term thinking. That is why so many people sacrifice their future for temporary image. There are people listening to this right now who feel financially stuck not because they never earned money, but because they spent money emotionally. Spent money to feel successful, to impress people, to escape insecurity, to avoid feeling behind in life. And eventually, those patterns became financial suffering. Most people never learned the psychology of money. They learned consumption, comparison, performance, lifestyle pressure. But not discipline, delayed gratification, financial patience, wealth-building psychology. And that difference changes entire lives. There is something dangerous about building a lifestyle before building stability. Because luxury without foundation creates pressure. And pressure eventually exposes everything. Some people are living inside financial anxiety daily just to maintain an image. An image that social media applauds, strangers admire,
People envy, but internally, their peace disappeared long ago. Real wealth and fake wealth feel different emotionally. Fake wealth says, "Look at me." Real wealth says, "I no longer need to prove anything." That difference is psychological maturity. The strongest financially free people often master discipline before luxury. Because discipline creates patience, stability, emotional control, long-term thinking. And long-term thinking builds real freedom. Most people underestimate how emotional money really is. Money reveals insecurity, ego, fear, discipline, self-worth, emotional control. That is why financial behavior often exposes identity. There are moments where your future self is begging you internally, "Please stop trying to look rich." Begging you to stop overspending, to stop performing success, to stop buying validation, and start building stability instead. Because financial freedom requires emotional maturity. Some people destroy their future quietly through lifestyle addiction. One purchase at a time, one comparison at a time, one emotional decision at a time, until eventually they wake up financially trapped.
Most people are not broke accidentally. They are trapped inside unconscious financial behavior. Behavior shaped by comparison, insecurity, emotional spending, lack of discipline, social pressure, and repeated financial behavior becomes financial identity. The strongest wealthy people think differently about money. They ask, "Will this build my future? Will this create freedom? Is this purchase emotional? Am I buying value or validation?" That awareness changes everything. There is something emotionally painful about realizing you spent years trying to look successful instead of becoming financially secure. Because eventually, the image collapses and reality remains. Most people are addicted to the feeling money creates, not the money itself. The feeling of status, importance, admiration, superiority, temporary emotional relief. But emotional spending creates long-term consequences. Real wealth is often invisible initially. Invisible because disciplined people invest quietly. Patient people build slowly. Emotionally mature people think long-term. But modern culture glorifies immediate appearance instead. This audiobook is not about becoming obsessed with money. It is about becoming conscious of why you spend, what you are chasing emotionally, what your lifestyle is costing you, what financial freedom actually requires. Because many people are not poor financially first. They are poor in discipline. One day, you will either thank yourself for building stability quietly, or you will realize you spent years buying an image while your future suffered silently, because fake wealth always has a hidden cost. There is one final truth before this audiobook begins. The people who become financially free are usually the people who finally decided, "I no longer want to look rich. I want to become free." Chapter 1. You started buying approval. Most people think they spend money for practical reasons, but many people are not buying products. They are buying approval. Approval from strangers, friends, social media, family, people they secretly want validation from. And that emotional need quietly becomes expensive. Let's slow this down. There are people listening to this right now who feel pressure every single day to look successful. Pressure to dress expensive, own luxury items, appear financially ahead, maintain an image, prove something silently. even when internally their financial life feels unstable. Many people are not spending money emotionally because they love luxury. They spend emotionally because they fear looking unsuccessful. That fear changes financial behavior deeply. The need for approval is expensive, very expensive. Because once your self-worth becomes connected to appearances, you start making financial decisions emotionally instead of intelligently. There is something psychologically dangerous about needing people to see you as successful, because eventually your lifestyle stops being about your future and becomes about performance. Most people are performing financially, performing through designer clothes, expensive phones, luxury lifestyles, social media aesthetics, unnecessary spending. And many of those performances are fueled by insecurity internally. Some people are not buying expensive things because they need them. They buy them because they need the feeling attached to them, the feeling of importance, admiration, validation, status, acceptance. That emotional attachment creates dangerous financial habits. Most people do not realize comparison quietly controls their spending. Comparison creates thoughts like, "I'm behind. Everybody else is progressing. I need to look successful too. People must not think I'm struggling." And those thoughts create emotional purchases. Social media intensified financial insecurity globally. Now people constantly compare themselves to vacations, luxury lifestyles, expensive fashion, business success, public wealth displays. And comparison creates emotional pressure. There are people listening to this right now who bought things they could not comfortably afford simply because they wanted to feel respected. And deep down, they know it. Many people are financially trapped because they spend money trying to fix emotional insecurity, trying to fix feelings like inadequacy, low self-worth, fear of judgment, social insecurity. But purchases cannot permanently heal emotional wounds. There is something emotionally exhausting about constantly trying to maintain an image, because image maintenance requires money, energy, emotional pressure, and constant comparison. And eventually, the lifestyle becomes psychologically draining. Some people are not financially poor. They are financially undisciplined. There is a difference, because money without discipline disappears quickly. The strongest financially free people often stop caring about impressing others, because they understand performing wealth delays real wealth. That awareness changes everything. Approval addiction destroys financial freedom slowly, one emotional purchase at a time, one comparison at a time, one unnecessary lifestyle decision at a time, until eventually debt replaces peace. Most people never learned how much ego affects money decisions. Ego says, "People must admire me. I need to look successful. I cannot appear behind. I deserve this lifestyle now." And emotional ego often creates financial destruction. There are moments where your future self is begging you internally, "Please stop trying to impress people," begging you to build stability quietly, to stop emotional spending, to stop performing wealth, to protect your future instead. Because financial freedom requires emotional maturity. Many people are secretly living beyond their means just to maintain appearances, and internally that creates stress, anxiety, pressure, emotional exhaustion. But externally, they continue performing success. Real wealth often grows quietly, quietly through discipline, patience, investing, intentional decisions, delayed gratification. But fake wealth demands constant visibility. That difference matters deeply. The strongest wealthy people think differently emotionally. They ask, "Will this improve my future? Am I buying value or validation? Is this purchase emotional?"
What is this lifestyle costing me long term? That awareness creates financial power. Most people spend money trying to create identity externally, trying to appear important, elevated, admired, powerful. But identity built on appearances becomes fragile emotionally. There is something psychologically painful about realizing you spent years trying to look successful instead of becoming financially secure, because eventually reality exposes unsustainable lifestyles. Some people fear simplicity because simplicity feels invisible. They fear looking average, appearing unsuccessful, not impressing others. But disciplined simplicity often creates long-term freedom. The strongest financially disciplined people become comfortable moving quietly because they are building stability, not performance. And that mindset changes entire lives. Many people are emotionally addicted to lifestyle upgrades. The bigger phone, the better clothes, the luxury experience, the public image. And lifestyle addiction quietly destroys long-term wealth. There are people listening to this right now who secretly feel trapped by the image they created. Trapped because their lifestyle now requires constant spending to maintain, and internally, that pressure feels heavy. The need to impress people often comes from childhood emotional conditioning. People who lacked validation, lacked recognition, felt unseen, felt inferior. Sometimes grow into adults who spend money trying to feel important externally. That psychology matters deeply. Most people think financial problems are only mathematical. Not true. Many financial problems are emotional. Emotional problems like insecurity, comparison, lack of discipline, impulsiveness, ego, and emotional spending. And emotional patterns create financial outcomes. Real financial freedom begins when you stop needing your lifestyle to prove your worth. That emotional shift changes everything, because now you stop performing and begin building intentionally. The strongest wealthy people understand peace is more valuable than appearances. Peace without debt, without pressure, without constant financial panic, without emotional overspending. That peace becomes priceless emotionally. Most people are buying temporary feelings of confidence, importance, status, validation. But temporary emotional highs often create long-term financial pain. There is something emotionally powerful about becoming disciplined enough to say, I no longer need strangers to validate my lifestyle. That mindset creates freedom internally. Every emotional purchase trains identity slightly. Every time you buy something to impress people, to feel important, to compete socially, you strengthen approval addiction slightly. And repeated emotional behavior becomes financial identity. The strongest people stop asking, how can I look wealthy? And begin asking, how can I become financially free? That question changes destiny. You cannot build real wealth while constantly feeding insecurity through spending. Impossible. Because emotional spending destroys long-term stability. Most people wait too long to confront their financial behavior honestly. Too long to ask, why do I really spend? Who am I trying to impress? What emotional need is controlling my money? What is this lifestyle costing my future? And eventually, years disappear inside performance. The strongest version of financial success is quiet confidence. Confidence that does not need applause, validation, attention, public performance, because real stability feels different emotionally.
One day, you will either thank yourself for building quietly, or you will realize you spent years buying approval while your future suffered silently. Because fake success always has a hidden cost.
There is one final truth in this chapter. You started buying approval quietly through emotional spending, comparison, insecurity, lifestyle pressure, the need to look successful. And the people who ultimately become financially free are usually the people who finally decided, I would rather build wealth quietly than perform success publicly.
Chapter 2. The Lifestyle You Cannot Afford. There is a dangerous phase many people enter quietly. The phase where their income and their lifestyle stop matching. But instead of slowing down, they continue spending, continue upgrading, continue performing success, and eventually their entire financial life becomes built on pressure. Let's slow this down. There are people listening to this right now who are financially exhausted, not because they earn nothing, but because their lifestyle became heavier than their reality. Heavier through unnecessary spending, emotional purchases, lifestyle inflation, comparison, social pressure. And deep down, they know they are trying to maintain a life they cannot comfortably sustain. Many people are not poor because they lack opportunity. They are financially trapped because their spending grew faster than their discipline. That difference changes entire lives. The dangerous thing about lifestyle inflation is that it feels normal. A slightly better phone, a slightly more expensive habit, a slightly more luxurious routine, a slightly more expensive image. And slowly, your life becomes financially expensive to maintain. Some people are not building wealth, they are building appearances, and appearances are costly, very costly, because appearances require constant spending, constant upgrading, constant performance, constant comparison, and eventually, the pressure becomes emotionally exhausting. Most people do not realize luxury can become psychological addiction, not because of the item itself, but because of the emotional feeling attached to it. The feeling of status, importance, superiority, validation, temporary confidence. That emotional attachment changes financial behavior deeply. There is something psychologically dangerous about becoming emotionally dependent on expensive living, because now simplicity begins feeling like failure, and that mindset destroys peace. There are people listening to this right now who secretly panic every month financially because their lifestyle became too heavy. Too many subscriptions, payments, image-based purchases, emotional expenses, unnecessary upgrades. And internally, they feel trapped by the very life they tried to create. Many people fear downgrading their lifestyle more than they fear financial instability. That sentence explains millions of financial problems. Modern culture constantly tells people, upgrade your life. But very few people ask, can I actually sustain this long term? And sustainability matters more than appearances. The strongest financially free people often live below what they can afford, because disciplined people think differently. They think long-term, strategically, emotionally controlled, while emotionally reactive people spend impulsively. There is something emotionally exhausting about trying to look financially successful while secretly feeling financially unstable, because internally you carry pressure, anxiety, uncertainty, silent panic, even while smiling publicly. Some people spend money to escape the emotional discomfort of their real life, buying luxury experiences, expensive habits, status symbols, temporary pleasure, to avoid insecurity, stress, emotional emptiness, comparison pain. But emotional spending creates long-term financial suffering. The dangerous thing about expensive lifestyles is that they quietly become identity. People begin thinking, this is just who I am. I deserve this image. I cannot go backward now.
and ego begins controlling financial decisions. Most people do not realize financial freedom often requires temporary humility. Humility to spend less, move quietly, stop impressing people, delay gratification, simplify life. And many people struggle emotionally with that humility. There are people listening to this right now who financially breathe easier immediately if they stopped trying to maintain appearances, but emotionally they fear looking unsuccessful. The lifestyle you cannot afford eventually begins controlling your choices, controlling your stress levels, your career decisions, your peace, your emotional state, your future flexibility. Because expensive lifestyles create invisible pressure. Many people are trapped inside financial performance, performing luxury, confidence, success, stability, while internally they feel overwhelmed. And that emotional contradiction destroys peace deeply. The strongest wealthy people understand freedom matters more than image. Freedom without financial panic, without unnecessary pressure, without emotional overspending, without constant comparison. That peace becomes priceless emotionally. Most people think wealth means spending more, but real wealth often means needing less validation. That emotional maturity changes everything. There is something psychologically powerful about becoming comfortable living beneath your ego, because now you stop spending to impress people and begin building intentionally. The strongest financially disciplined people become emotionally detached from appearances, detached from luxury validation, comparison, status pressure, public approval, because emotionally detached people make clearer financial decisions. Some people are not financially struggling because they are irresponsible. They are financially struggling because they are emotionally influenced constantly. Influenced by social media, peer pressure, status culture, comparison, and insecurity. And emotional influence shapes financial outcomes deeply. There are moments where your future self is begging you internally, please stop building a life we cannot sustain. Begging you to simplify, to become disciplined, to stop performing wealth, to protect long-term stability, because peace matters more than appearances. Most people underestimate how expensive ego becomes over time. Ego says, upgrade now. People must respect you. You deserve the luxury. You cannot look average. And emotional ego often creates financial chaos. The strongest financially free people often move silently. Silently because they are focused on ownership, not performance. Ownership of peace, time, stability, freedom. That mindset creates long-term wealth. There is something emotionally painful about realizing you built a lifestyle that secretly drains you financially, drains your energy, your peace, your future, your flexibility. That realization creates awakening. Most people are chasing the appearance of wealth instead of the feeling of freedom. But appearances impress strangers temporarily. Freedom changes your life permanently. The strongest people stop asking, how can I look successful? And begin asking, how can I become financially peaceful? That question changes destiny. Every emotional upgrade creates responsibility. Every expensive habit, luxury purchase, unnecessary lifestyle expansion creates long-term financial weight, and many people ignore that reality emotionally. You cannot build financial freedom while constantly feeding lifestyle addiction. Impossible, because addiction destroys discipline. Most people wait too long to simplify their lives, too long to cut unnecessary expenses, stop emotional spending, reduce lifestyle pressure, protect their future intentionally, and eventually years disappear inside financial performance. The strongest version of wealth is quiet stability. Stability without panic, without unnecessary debt pressure, without emotional overspending, without constant comparison. That peace changes people psychologically. There is something emotionally freeing about finally admitting, I no longer want a lifestyle that secretly controls me. That honesty creates transformation, because now you stop performing wealth and begin building freedom. Every disciplined financial decision rebuilds your future slightly. Every time you spend intentionally, resist emotional purchases, simplify your lifestyle, think long-term, you strengthen financial freedom slightly. That repetition changes destiny. One day, you will either thank yourself for living below your ego, or you will realize you spent years maintaining a lifestyle that secretly destroyed your peace, because fake luxury always has a hidden emotional cost. There is one final truth in this chapter. The lifestyle you cannot afford eventually becomes the life that controls you. Through pressure, emotional spending, comparison, lifestyle addiction, financial performance. And the people who ultimately become financially free are usually the people who finally decided, I would rather own my future quietly than perform success publicly.
Chapter 3. Social media made you financially insecure. There was a time when people compared themselves mostly to neighbors, friends, family, people they actually knew. Now, people compare themselves to millions of carefully edited lives every single day. And that psychological shift changed people financially, completely. Let's slow this down. There are people listening to this right now who feel financially behind constantly, not because they are truly failing, but because social media trained them to feel inadequate. Inadequate because someone travels more, someone dresses better, someone looks richer, someone appears more successful, someone seems ahead in life. And comparison quietly creates financial pressure internally. Social media did not just change attention spans, it changed financial psychology, because now people no longer simply want stability, they want visible success, visible luxury, status, lifestyle, validation, applause, and visibility became more important than peace. Most people are not comparing realities, they are comparing performances. Performances carefully edited, strategically posted, emotionally manipulated, financially exaggerated. But emotionally, the brain still reacts as if it is real life. There is something psychologically dangerous about seeing luxury constantly, because repeated exposure normalizes expensive living, and eventually, average life begins feeling not enough. That is how financial insecurity quietly grows, not through lack alone, but through comparison. Comparison creates thoughts like, I'm behind, everybody else is progressing, I should have more by now, why does my life not look like that? And those thoughts influence spending behavior deeply. Many people are not buying things because they truly want them, they buy things because social media made them feel emotionally small without them. That emotional manipulation matters deeply. Most people do not realize their self-worth became connected to appearance online. Appearance of success, wealth, luxury, status, lifestyle. And once identity becomes tied to appearances, financial discipline becomes emotionally difficult. There are people listening to this right now who secretly feel pressure to look successful online, pressure to post achievements, display luxury, upgrade constantly, maintain image, appear winning, even while internally their finances feel unstable. Social media rewards appearance more than reality. People receive attention, admiration, validation, social status for looking wealthy, not necessarily for being financially free. That difference is dangerous psychologically. Many people are emotionally addicted to comparison, scrolling constantly, watching lifestyles constantly, observing success constantly, and over time their mind begins believing they are falling behind in life. The dangerous thing about comparison is that it destroys gratitude quietly. People stop appreciating progress, simplicity, peace, stability,
because now they are emotionally focused on what others appear to have. There is something emotionally exhausting about trying to compete with lifestyles you were never supposed to compete with, because many online lifestyles are exaggerated, financed through debt, strategically curated, emotionally performative, but comparison makes them feel real psychologically. Social media intensified lifestyle pressure globally. Now even people with modest income feel pressured to live like celebrities, and that emotional pressure creates financial destruction quietly. Some people are not financially struggling because they earn too little. They're struggling because their desires became artificially inflated. Inflated through constant exposure, luxury culture, influencer lifestyles, online comparison, and inflated desires destroy financial peace. Most people underestimate how emotionally manipulative modern marketing became. Companies no longer sell products only. They sell identity, status, belonging, admiration, emotional fantasy, and emotionally vulnerable people overspend trying to buy those feelings. There are moments where your future self is begging you internally, please stop comparing your life to strangers online, begging you to protect your peace, to stop emotional spending, to stop chasing appearances, to build stability quietly instead. Because comparison destroys clarity. Many people are silently drowning financially, trying to keep up with people who are also secretly drowning financially. That irony explains modern culture perfectly. Real wealth often looks boring online, because real wealth is often disciplined, patient, intentional, private, emotionally mature, but fake wealth performs constantly for attention. The strongest financially free people become emotionally detached from online comparison, detached enough to move quietly, to simplify life, to delay gratification, to ignore unnecessary pressure. That emotional discipline changes financial outcomes completely. There is something psychologically powerful about no longer needing your life to look impressive publicly, because now you stop performing and begin protecting your future intentionally. Most people are not financially insecure only because of money. They are financially insecure because comparison made them feel inadequate internally, and insecure people often spend emotionally. Comparison creates artificial urgency to upgrade faster, achieve faster, look successful earlier, prove yourself publicly, and rushed financial behavior creates unstable lives. The strongest people stop asking, how do I compare to others, and begin asking, what kind of future am I building quietly? That question creates emotional stability. Social media trained many people to confuse attention with success, but attention does not equal peace. Attention does not equal freedom. Attention does not equal stability, and many people learn that too late. There are people listening to this right now who secretly feel emotionally tired from comparison, tired from chasing image, feeling behind, proving themselves, trying to look successful, and internally they miss peace. The strongest wealthy people often become less interested in appearances over time because emotional maturity changes priorities. Now they value freedom, peace, ownership, stability, flexibility, more than applause, image, luxury performance. Most people do not realize comparison changes identity slowly. Every day, comparison teaches dissatisfaction, impatience, insecurity, emotional dependence on validation, and repeated comparison reshapes behavior. You cannot build financial peace while emotionally competing with strangers constantly. Impossible, because comparison destroys contentment, and destroyed contentment creates emotional spending. The strongest people protect their attention intentionally, protecting what they consume, what influences them, what they compare themselves to, what emotionally pressures them, because attention shapes financial behavior deeply. There is something emotionally freeing about finally deciding, I no longer need my life to impress strangers online. That mindset changes everything, because now you stop performing and begin protecting your future intentionally. Every disciplined financial decision rebuilds confidence slightly. Every time you ignore comparison, spend intentionally, move quietly, protect your peace, you strengthen emotional maturity slightly. That repetition changes identity. Most people wait too long to disconnect emotionally from comparison culture, too long to stop performing success, to simplify life, to protect their future, to think independently. And eventually, years disappear inside lifestyle competition. One day, you will either thank yourself for ignoring comparison pressure, or you will realize you spent years financially exhausting yourself trying to keep up with people who were never thinking about you that deeply anyway. Because comparison always has a hidden cost. There is one final truth in this chapter. Social media made many people financially insecure quietly. Through comparison, lifestyle pressure, emotional spending, status addiction, performance culture. And the people who ultimately become financially free are usually the people who finally decided, I would rather build peace quietly than perform success publicly.
Chapter 4. Looking rich is keeping you poor. Some people never become financially free. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack opportunity, but because they became addicted to looking wealthy before becoming stable. And that addiction quietly destroys their future. Let's slow this down. There are people listening to this right now who look financially successful externally. Nice clothes, expensive habits, luxury lifestyle, beautiful social media presence. But internally, they are carrying debt, anxiety, pressure, financial instability, silent panic, and deep down, they know their lifestyle is heavier than their reality. Looking rich and being wealthy are completely different things. Looking rich is visible, loud, performative, emotionally driven. Real wealth is quiet, disciplined, patient, strategic, emotionally controlled. And many people sacrifice the second, trying to perform the first. The dangerous thing about fake wealth is that it creates temporary admiration. People compliment your clothes, your lifestyle, your car, your appearance, and emotionally, that validation feels rewarding. But validation is expensive if your future is paying for it. Many people are financially trapped because they are addicted to appearances emotionally. Addicted to looking successful, looking important, looking elevated, looking financially ahead, even while internally their financial foundation is weak. There is something psychologically dangerous about constantly needing external proof of success, because eventually your identity becomes dependent on image, and image-based identity creates emotional spending. Some people are not building assets, they are building impressions, and impressions do not create freedom. The strongest wealthy people often appear financially boring externally, because disciplined people understand ownership matters more than appearances. Ownership of peace, time, stability, investments, freedom. That mindset creates long-term wealth. Most people underestimate how emotionally addictive luxury becomes, not because luxury is evil, but because luxury temporarily changes how people feel internally. People feel respected, admired, elevated, confident, important, and emotionally insecure people become dependent on those feelings. That is why many people overspend repeatedly, not because they truly need more things, but because they became emotionally attached to the feeling of looking successful. There are people listening to this right now who secretly feel trapped by their image, trapped because they cannot financially relax anymore. Their lifestyle now requires constant income pressure, constant performance, constant upgrading, constant emotional spending.
and internally they feel exhausted. Most people never ask themselves, what is this image costing me emotionally? Costing peace, flexibility, savings, freedom, stability, because emotional spending rarely feels dangerous immediately. Looking rich often delays real wealth, because money spent on appearances, unnecessary upgrades, status symbols, emotional validation is money not being used to invest, to build stability, to create ownership, to buy freedom later. That difference changes entire futures. Many people are living in financial survival mode quietly while still trying to appear successful publicly. That emotional contradiction destroys peace deeply. The strongest financially free people become emotionally detached from appearances, detached enough to repeat outfits, to simplify life, to move quietly, to stop chasing validation, because emotional detachment creates financial clarity. There is something emotionally powerful about no longer needing strangers to believe you are successful, because now you stop performing and begin building intentionally. Some people spend years looking wealthy without ever becoming financially secure, and eventually reality catches up emotionally. Most people think wealth means spending more, but real wealth often means needing less validation. That emotional maturity changes financial destiny. There are moments where your future self is begging you internally, please stop sacrificing our future for appearances, begging you to simplify, to stop emotional spending, to stop proving yourself publicly, and build quietly instead, because peace matters more than performance. The dangerous thing about status culture is that it rewards visibility, not stability. People admire luxury, image, expensive lifestyles, but they rarely see debt, pressure, anxiety, financial panic. That hidden reality destroys many lives quietly. Many people do not actually want wealth. They want the emotional feeling associated with wealth, the feeling of admiration, superiority, validation, social acceptance, and emotional craving creates financial destruction. Real wealth feels emotionally different. Real wealth feels calm, stable, patient, intentional, peaceful. Fake wealth feels loud, pressured, emotional, performative, unstable. That difference matters deeply. The strongest financially disciplined people often stop trying to look rich completely because they understand freedom is more attractive than performance. Most people are financially stressed because they built a lifestyle designed for attention, not sustainability. And unsustainable lifestyles eventually create suffering. There is something psychologically exhausting about constantly trying to maintain an image, because image maintenance requires spending, comparison, upgrading, performance, and emotional pressure, and eventually the lifestyle begins controlling you. Many people are buying temporary social approval with permanent financial consequences. That sentence alone explains modern spending culture. The strongest people stop asking, how can I impress people, and begin asking, how can I create freedom for myself? That question changes everything. Most people confuse luxury with wealth, but luxury can be rented, leased, borrowed, financed. Real wealth is ownership. Ownership creates peace, options, flexibility, long-term freedom. That difference is psychological maturity. You cannot build real financial peace while constantly feeding ego through spending. Impossible. because ego creates impulsive decisions, and impulsive decisions destroy long-term stability. There are people listening to this right now who secretly know their lifestyle is slowing down their future, but emotionally they fear letting go of the image. That fear keeps many people financially trapped for years. The strongest financially free people become comfortable being underestimated. Comfortable because they are building something deeper than appearance, something quieter, something sustainable. There is something emotionally freeing about finally deciding I no longer need my life to look expensive, because now you stop chasing applause and begin protecting your future.
Every disciplined financial decision rebuilds freedom slightly. Every time you resist unnecessary spending, ignore comparison, simplify your lifestyle, think long-term, you strengthen your future slightly. That repetition creates wealth. Most people wait too long to separate their self-worth from their appearance. Too long to stop performing wealth, stop emotional spending, stop comparing themselves, build stability intentionally, and eventually, years disappear inside lifestyle pressure. The strongest version of wealth is quiet peace. Peace without financial panic, emotional overspending, lifestyle pressure, constant comparison. That peace changes people psychologically. One day, you will either thank yourself for building quietly, or you will realize you spent years looking wealthy while staying financially trapped internally. Because appearances always have hidden costs. There is one final truth in this chapter. Looking rich is keeping many people poor through ego, comparison, emotional spending, lifestyle addiction, performance culture. And the people who ultimately become financially free are usually the people who finally decided, I no longer want to look wealthy. I want to become untouchably free.
Chapter 5. Emotional spending is destroying your future. Most people think spending is financial, but for many people, spending is emotional. Emotional spending is buying to feel better, buying to escape stress, buying to feel important, buying to feel successful, buying to numb emotional emptiness. And over time, those emotional decisions quietly destroy financial freedom. Let's slow this down. There are people listening to this right now who do not spend money because they truly need something. They spend because they are emotionally overwhelmed by stress, loneliness, insecurity, comparison, frustration, emotional exhaustion. And spending temporarily feels like relief. Emotional spending is dangerous because it feels justified in the moment. The brain says, you deserve this. This will make you feel better. You work hard. Just enjoy yourself. And emotionally vulnerable people listen to those thoughts repeatedly. The dangerous thing about emotional spending is that it creates temporary emotional relief, very temporary. A new purchase creates excitement, stimulation, emotional escape, temporary confidence, but eventually reality returns and the emotional emptiness remains. Many people are not addicted to products, they are addicted to emotional escape. Escape from stress, insecurity, boredom, sadness, self-doubt, and money becomes the coping mechanism. There is something psychologically dangerous about using spending as emotional therapy, because now every difficult emotion becomes connected to consumption. Feeling stressed? Spend. Feeling sad? Spend. Feeling insecure? Upgrade something. Feeling emotionally empty? Buy something expensive. And repeated emotional coping becomes financial destruction. There are people listening to this right now who secretly regret many purchases they made emotionally. Purchases made during sadness, during insecurity, during loneliness, during comparison, during emotional impulsiveness.
and deep down, they know the purchase never solved the real problem. Most people underestimate how emotional money behavior really is, because financial decisions often reveal emotional maturity, discipline, self-control, insecurity, impulsiveness. Money exposes psychology. Some people are not financially trapped because they earn too little. They are financially trapped because they spend emotionally too often. That repetition changes entire futures. The strongest financially disciplined people learn how to sit with uncomfortable emotions without needing to spend money. That emotional control creates freedom. Emotional spending often begins in silent pain. Pain like feeling unseen, feeling behind, feeling emotionally tired, feeling inadequate, feeling disconnected from purpose, and consumption becomes emotional distraction. Many people are secretly trying to buy confidence, trying to buy attractiveness, importance, status, self-worth, emotional validation. But identity cannot be permanently purchased externally. There is something emotionally exhausting about constantly needing purchases to feel temporarily okay, because eventually the emotional high fades and financial pressure remains. Most people never learned how to regulate emotions without consumption, so instead they scroll, shop, overspend, upgrade impulsively, chase stimulation, and repeated emotional stimulation weakens discipline. The dangerous thing about modern culture is that companies profit from emotional weakness. They study insecurity, loneliness, impulsiveness, emotional triggers, validation psychology, and then market products emotionally, not logically. That is why emotionally vulnerable people often overspend most, because emotional spending is rarely about the item itself. It is about the emotional fantasy attached to the item. There are moments where your future self is begging you internally, please stop spending to escape your emotions, begging you to build discipline, to confront your pain honestly, to stop emotional impulsivity, to protect your future instead. Because emotional maturity creates financial stability. Most people do not realize their habits are training their identity financially. Every emotional purchase says we cannot regulate emotions without spending, and repeated behavior becomes identity. Some people spend money because they're trying to feel alive again. That sentence explains modern consumption deeply. People chase luxury experiences, shopping highs, expensive stimulation, lifestyle excitement to escape emotional numbness internally. The strongest financially free people become emotionally disciplined, disciplined enough to delay gratification, to resist impulsiveness, to think long-term, to separate emotions from spending. That emotional control changes destiny. There is something psychologically powerful about being able to say, I feel emotionally overwhelmed, but I will not sabotage my future because of it. That mindset creates freedom. Most people are trying to solve emotional problems with financial decisions, trying to solve loneliness with luxury, insecurity with appearance, stress with shopping, emptiness with consumption. But emotional wounds require emotional healing, not purchases. The strongest people become aware of what triggers emotional spending, triggers like comparison, sadness, boredom, insecurity, stress, loneliness, because awareness interrupts unconscious behavior. There are people listening to this right now who secretly know their spending is emotional. They know the shopping is impulsive, the upgrades are unnecessary, the purchases are emotional reactions, but emotionally they feel trapped inside the cycle. Emotional spending creates invisible consequences, consequences like debt, anxiety, instability, guilt, financial pressure, emotional exhaustion, and eventually the temporary pleasure becomes long-term stress. Most people think discipline is restrictive, but financial discipline creates peace, peace without panic, impulsive regret, emotional overspending,
constant financial stress. That peace changes people psychologically. The strongest financially stable people often become emotionally calm around money, calm enough to wait, to think strategically, to avoid impulsiveness, to separate emotions from decisions. That calmness creates long-term stability. There is something psychologically powerful about being able to say, I feel emotionally overwhelmed, but I will not sabotage my future because of it. That mindset creates freedom. Because now you stop reacting emotionally and begin acting intentionally. Every disciplined financial decision rebuilds self-respect slightly. Every time you resist emotional spending, delay gratification, think long-term, protect your future, you strengthen emotional maturity slightly. That repetition changes identity. Most people wait too long to confront the emotional side of money, too long to ask, why do I spend emotionally? What feeling am I trying to escape? What insecurity is controlling my money? What emotional pain is shaping my financial behavior? And eventually, years disappear inside emotional impulsiveness. The strongest version of wealth requires emotional control, not only income, because people without emotional discipline often destroy financial opportunity repeatedly. Some people are not financially poor first, they are emotionally undisciplined first, and emotional indiscipline eventually appears financially. You cannot build financial peace while constantly using money as emotional escape. Impossible, because emotional impulsivity destroys stability slowly. The strongest financially free people understand that money should serve your future, not your temporary emotions. That mindset changes everything. One day, you will either thank yourself for learning emotional discipline early, or you will realize you spent years buying temporary emotional relief while your future quietly suffered, because emotional spending always sends the bill later. There is one final truth in this chapter. Emotional spending is destroying many people's futures quietly, through impulsiveness, insecurity, emotional escape, lack of discipline, and temporary pleasure addiction. And the people who ultimately become financially free are usually the people who finally decided, I no longer want money to control my emotions. I want emotional discipline to control my money.
Chapter 6. Debt, Pressure, and Silent Panic. Most people do not talk honestly about debt. They hide it. Hide the stress, hide the pressure, hide the anxiety, the sleepless nights, the silent panic. Because debt is not only financial, debt becomes emotional, and emotional debt changes people quietly. Let's slow this down. There are people listening to this right now who smile publicly while privately worrying about bills, repayments, overdue balances, financial obligations, survival pressure, and deep down, they feel trapped. Debt becomes psychologically heavy when your future income already belongs to yesterday's decisions. That sentence alone explains why many people feel emotionally exhausted. The dangerous thing about debt is that it often begins innocently. One small loan, emotional purchase, lifestyle upgrade, credit decision, I'll pay later mindset. And slowly, temporary convenience becomes long-term pressure. Many people are not only carrying financial debt, they are carrying emotional debt too. Emotional debt from trying to impress people, overspending emotionally, poor financial discipline, comparison, impulsive financial decisions. And internally, that emotional weight becomes exhausting. There is something psychologically terrifying about waking up every morning already financially behind, already owing, already pressured, already anxious. Because debt quietly steals peace. Most people underestimate how much financial pressure affects emotional health. Pressure changes sleep, focus, confidence, emotional stability, relationships, identity.
and prolonged financial stress reshapes people psychologically. Some people are not living freely anymore. They are surviving financially. Surviving paycheck to paycheck, repayment to repayment, pressure to pressure. And eventually, their life becomes emotionally consumed by survival. Debt often begins emotionally before it becomes mathematical. People borrow because they want validation, they want appearances, they want temporary relief, they want emotional escape, and emotional impulsivity creates financial consequences. There are people listening to this right now who secretly avoid checking bank balances, debt notifications, repayment messages, financial reality, because emotionally, the pressure already feels overwhelming. The dangerous thing about silent financial panic is that many people pretend they are okay publicly. Pretend the lifestyle is sustainable, the spending is manageable, the stress is under control. But internally, their nervous system is exhausted. Most people are trying to maintain appearances while quietly drowning financially. That emotional contradiction destroys peace deeply. There is something emotionally painful about realizing you built pressure instead of freedom. Pressure through emotional spending, poor discipline, lifestyle addiction, comparison, impulsive financial behavior. And now the future feels heavy. The strongest financially disciplined people respect peace more than appearances, because they understand financial pressure destroys emotional clarity. And emotionally exhausted people struggle to think long-term. Many people are financially trapped because they normalized debt emotionally. Normalized borrowing constantly, buying beyond means, living ahead of income, emotional spending. And normalized financial chaos eventually becomes identity. The dangerous thing about pressure is that it slowly changes personality. Financial pressure can make people emotionally reactive, anxious, exhausted, insecure, desperate, mentally drained. That is why financial discipline matters psychologically. There are moments where your future self is begging you internally, please stop creating pressure we cannot sustain. Begging you to simplify your life, to stop emotional spending, to confront reality honestly, to rebuild discipline, because peace matters more than performance.
Most people think more money alone will solve financial stress. Not always, because without discipline, more money often creates more spending, more lifestyle inflation, more pressure. And emotionally undisciplined people repeat the same cycle at higher income levels. The strongest financially free people become obsessed with reducing pressure, reducing unnecessary expenses, impulsive decisions, lifestyle addiction, emotional purchases, debt dependence. Because reduced pressure creates emotional freedom. There is something emotionally exhausting about trying to survive financially while pretending everything is okay externally. That emotional masking drains people deeply. Many people are trapped in financial cycles because they keep making decisions emotionally. Emotional decisions like, I deserve this, I'll figure it out later, everybody else has it, I cannot look broke. And repeated emotional thinking creates long-term instability. Most people do not realize financial peace is deeply connected to emotional maturity. Emotionally mature people delay gratification, think long-term, resist impulsiveness, separate ego from money. And that mindset changes everything. Some people are carrying silent financial shame. Shame from debt, bad decisions, overspending, financial instability, lifestyle pressure. And because shame feels heavy emotionally, they avoid confronting reality honestly. But avoidance makes pressure worse because ignored financial problems grow silently, and silent problems eventually become emotional crises. The strongest people confront reality early, even uncomfortable reality, because honesty creates clarity, and clarity creates solutions. There are people listening to this right now who feel emotionally tired, not because life is impossible, but because financial pressure has been draining them silently for too long, draining peace, confidence, energy, emotional stability. That invisible pressure changes people deeply. Debt steals future flexibility, because now opportunities feel risky, freedom feels distant, decisions feel pressured, survival becomes priority, and emotionally that creates heaviness. The strongest financially disciplined people understand something powerful. Freedom is not about looking rich. Freedom is about sleeping peacefully, having options, reducing pressure, owning your future, protecting your mind. That emotional peace becomes priceless. There is something psychologically powerful about becoming financially honest with yourself. Honest enough to say, this lifestyle is unsustainable. These habits are hurting me. I need discipline. I need to stop performing success. That honesty changes lives. Most people wait too long to simplify their lives, too long to reduce pressure, stop overspending, confront debt, rebuild financial discipline. And eventually, years disappear inside survival mode. You cannot build peace while constantly feeding financial chaos. Impossible, because chaos destroys emotional stability slowly. The strongest, wealthy people often move quietly. Quietly because they're protecting stability, not chasing applause. And emotional stability creates better financial decisions. Every disciplined financial choice rebuilds freedom slightly. Every time you spend intentionally, reduce pressure, avoid impulsiveness, confront reality honestly, you strengthen your future slightly. That repetition changes destiny. Most people are not destroyed financially overnight. They are destroyed gradually. Gradually through emotional spending, lifestyle pressure, poor discipline, debt dependence, financial avoidance, and repeated behavior creates repeated suffering. There is something emotionally freeing about no longer pretending financially, no longer pretending the lifestyle is sustainable, the pressure is manageable, the debt is harmless, because honesty creates transformation. One day, you will either thank yourself for confronting reality early, or you will realize you spent years performing success publicly while silently panicking privately, because financial pressure always exposes the truth eventually. There is one final truth in this chapter. Debt, pressure, and silent panic are destroying many people emotionally. Through impulsive spending, financial avoidance, lifestyle addiction, comparison, emotional immaturity. And the people who ultimately become financially free are usually the people who finally decided, I no longer want a life that looks expensive. I want a life that feels peaceful.
Chapter 7. Rich people think differently about money. Most people think wealth is only about income. It isn't. Wealth is deeply psychological. Because two people can earn the same amount of money, and one becomes financially free, while the other remains trapped for decades. Why? Because they think differently. Let's slow this down. There are people listening to this right now who believe more money alone will change their life. But many people receive more money and still remain stressed, financially unstable, impulsive, trapped in lifestyle pressure. Because income without discipline changes very little long term. Rich people do not only behave differently, they think differently emotionally. They think about ownership, leverage, freedom, long-term stability, delayed gratification. While many financially struggling people think about appearances, temporary pleasure, emotional spending, social validation, short-term comfort, and mindset shapes financial destiny. Most people think wealthy people spend more emotionally, but emotionally mature wealthy people often spend more intentionally. That difference changes everything. Poor financial thinking asks, how can I look successful?
Wealthy financial thinking asks, how can I become free? That single shift changes entire lives. The dangerous thing about emotional thinking is that it prioritizes feeling rich instead of becoming financially secure. And many people sacrifice long-term freedom for short-term emotional satisfaction. Rich people often value ownership over appearances, ownership of businesses, investments, time, assets, opportunities, because ownership creates freedom, while appearances create pressure. Most financially struggling people are focused on consumption, what to buy, upgrade, display, experience. But financially disciplined people focus on what can grow quietly over time. That mindset creates wealth slowly. There is something psychologically powerful about becoming less emotional around money, less emotional while spending, while investing, while comparing yourself, while making financial decisions, because emotional control creates clarity. Many people are financially reactive to trends, social pressure, luxury culture, comparison, temporary feelings. But wealthy thinking is strategic. Strategic people move differently. Rich people often understand money is a tool, not identity, not self-worth, not emotional validation, a tool. And emotionally detached thinking creates smarter decisions. There are people listening to this right now who secretly know their relationship with money is emotional, and deep down, they know their thinking must change before their future changes. Rich people understand discipline compounds. Small disciplined decisions repeated for years create massive long-term results, but emotionally impulsive people often destroy progress repeatedly. Most people chase the image of wealth, but wealthy people chase the structure of freedom. That difference separates appearance from reality. You cannot build long-term wealth with short-term emotional habits. Impossible, because emotional impulsiveness destroys consistency. The strongest wealthy people often appear calm around money, calm because they are not emotionally controlled by comparison, status, validation, temporary pleasure, and emotional calmness creates better decisions. There is something emotionally mature about being able to say, I do not need this right now. That sentence alone protects many futures. Most people wait too long to change their financial identity, too long to stop emotional spending, to think long-term, to build intentionally, to separate ego from money, and eventually, years disappear inside financial immaturity. Every disciplined financial decision rebuilds freedom slightly. Every time you think strategically, delay gratification, avoid impulsiveness, protect your peace, you strengthen wealth psychologically. That repetition changes destiny. The strongest version of wealth is emotional control, because emotionally controlled people invest better, spend better, think better, build better, and emotional maturity creates long-term stability. One day, you will either thank yourself for learning wealthy thinking early, or you will realize you spent years thinking emotionally about money while your future quietly suffered. Because financial psychology always shapes financial outcomes eventually. There is one final truth in this chapter. Rich people think differently about money. They think long-term, strategically, emotionally disciplined, freedom-focused, ownership-focused. And the people who ultimately become financially free are usually the people who finally decided, I no longer want money to make me look successful. I want money to make me untouchably free.
Chapter 8. Discipline creates financial freedom. Most people want financial freedom, but very few people want the discipline required to create it. Because freedom is expensive in the beginning. It costs comfort, impulsiveness, emotional spending, temporary pleasure, lifestyle addiction, and many people are unwilling to pay that price consistently.
Let's slow this down. There are people listening to this right now who desperately want peace, stability, freedom, financial security, less pressure. But their habits are still feeding impulsiveness, comparison, emotional spending, short-term thinking. And repeated habits create repeated financial outcomes. Financial freedom is not built emotionally. It is built behaviorally, through discipline, patience, consistency, intentional decisions, delayed gratification. That repetition changes futures. Most people think discipline feels exciting. Not usually. Discipline often feels uncomfortable, repetitive, quiet, invisible, emotionally difficult, especially in a culture addicted to instant gratification. The dangerous thing about modern culture is that it glorifies spending more than saving, building, investing, or waiting. And emotionally reactive people become financially trapped inside that system. Discipline creates freedom because disciplined people stop making emotional decisions constantly. They stop overspending impulsively, upgrading unnecessarily, performing wealth publicly, chasing validation financially. And emotional stability creates financial stability. Many people are financially exhausted because their money habits are emotionally chaotic. Chaotic spending, lifestyle choices, priorities, financial goals, impulsive decisions. And chaotic habits create chaotic futures. The strongest financially free people often build boring routines, boring budgeting, saving, investing, tracking expenses, spending intentionally. But boring discipline creates extraordinary freedom later. There is something psychologically powerful about controlling your desires instead of letting your desires control your future. That emotional control changes everything. Most people do not realize discipline protects peace, because disciplined people experience less panic, less debt pressure, less emotional spending, less financial chaos. That peace becomes priceless emotionally. There are people listening to this right now who secretly know their biggest financial problem is not income, it is inconsistency. Inconsistency with spending, saving, discipline, long-term thinking, and emotional control. And inconsistency destroys momentum quietly. The dangerous thing about impulsive living is that small, undisciplined habits compound. One unnecessary purchase, emotional spending decision, impulsive upgrade, comparison-based expense may feel harmless, but repeated undisciplined behavior creates financial suffering slowly. The strongest financially disciplined people become comfortable sacrificing temporary pleasure, because they understand short-term sacrifice creates long-term freedom. That mindset changes destiny. Most people think freedom comes from earning more, but many high earners remain trapped. Why? Because without discipline, more income often creates more lifestyle inflation, more pressure, more emotional spending. Discipline creates space. Space to breathe financially, think clearly, make better decisions, protect your future, avoid panic. And emotional space changes people psychologically. There is something emotionally exhausting about constantly restarting financially. Restarting because savings disappeared, impulsive spending happened, emotional decisions ruined progress, lifestyle pressure returned. And repeated self-sabotage destroys confidence internally. The strongest wealthy people often trust discipline more than motivation, because motivation changes daily, discipline remains,
and repeated disciplined behavior creates predictable progress. Most people want financial freedom emotionally, but still behave financially, impulsively, emotionally, reactively, inconsistently, and behavior always reveals priorities. There are moments where your future self is begging you internally, please become disciplined, begging you to stop overspending, to stop emotional purchases, to stop chasing appearances, to build stability quietly instead, because discipline protects your future. Most people are addicted to immediate pleasure, immediate upgrades, convenience, luxury, stimulation, emotional reward. But financially disciplined people understand everything has a long-term cost. The strongest financially free people often become emotionally independent from trends, social pressure, comparison, status culture, because emotional independence creates clearer decisions. There is something psychologically freeing about being able to say, I do not need this right now. That sentence alone protects countless futures. Discipline creates confidence, because every disciplined financial decision says we are protecting ourselves, and repeated self-protection rebuilds self-trust slowly. Most people underestimate how deeply financial discipline affects identity. Disciplined people begin feeling calmer, stronger, more intentional, more in control, because structure creates emotional stability. Some people are not financially poor permanently. They are temporarily undisciplined consistently, and repeated undiscipline eventually creates long-term struggle. The strongest financially disciplined people focus on ownership, investing, long-term security, future flexibility, not temporary applause. That mindset separates freedom from performance. There is something emotionally mature about delaying gratification quietly, about saying later, not now, my future matters more. I refuse to sabotage myself emotionally. That maturity changes financial destiny. Another layer. Most people do not realize discipline compounds. Every intentional purchase, disciplined month, avoided impulse, strategic decision strengthens financial stability slightly, and repeated disciplined behavior creates freedom over time. You cannot build financial peace while constantly feeding emotional impulses. Impossible, because impulsiveness destroys consistency, and consistency creates wealth. The strongest people simplify their lives intentionally, simplify spending, distractions, unnecessary pressure, ego purchases, emotional habits, because simplicity protects freedom. There are people listening to this right now who secretly crave peace more than luxury. Peace without debt panic, emotional spending, financial stress, lifestyle pressure. And deep down, they know discipline is the bridge to that peace. Most people think discipline feels restrictive, but lack of discipline is what creates prison. Prison through debt, pressure, instability, financial anxiety, emotional chaos. Discipline creates escape. The strongest financially free people often move quietly for years, quietly investing, building, sacrificing, delaying gratification, protecting their future, and eventually that quiet discipline creates loud freedom. There is something emotionally powerful about finally becoming reliable to yourself financially, reliable enough to budget intentionally, to stop emotional spending, to think long-term, to protect your future consistently. That reliability rebuilds identity deeply. Most people wait too long to become financially disciplined, too long to simplify life, reduce pressure, stop performing wealth, build stability intentionally, and eventually years disappear inside emotional spending cycles. Every disciplined decision rebuilds freedom slightly. Every resisted impulse, avoided comparison, intentional investment, simplified habit moves you closer to financial peace. That repetition changes destiny. The strongest version of wealth is not luxury, it is freedom.
Most people want financial freedom emotionally, but still behave financially impulsively, emotionally, reactively, inconsistently. And behavior always reveals priorities. There are moments where your future self is begging you internally, please become disciplined, begging you to stop overspending, to stop emotional purchases, to chase appearances, to build stability quietly instead, because discipline protects your future. Most people are addicted to immediate pleasure, immediate upgrades, convenience, luxury, stimulation, emotional reward. But financially disciplined people understand everything has a long-term cost. The strongest financially free people often become emotionally independent from trends, social pressure, comparison, status culture, because emotional independence creates clearer decisions. There is something psychologically freeing about being able to say, I do not need this right now. That sentence alone protects countless futures. Discipline creates confidence, because every disciplined financial decision says we are protecting ourselves, and repeated self-protection rebuilds self-trust slowly. Most people underestimate how deeply financial discipline affects identity. Disciplined people begin feeling calmer, stronger, more intentional, more in control, because structure creates emotional stability. Some people are not financially poor permanently. They are temporarily undisciplined consistently, and repeated undiscipline eventually creates long-term struggle. The strongest financially free people focus on ownership, investing, long-term security, future flexibility, not temporary applause. That mindset separates freedom from performance. There is something emotionally mature about delaying gratification quietly, about saying, later, not now. My future matters more. I refuse to sabotage myself emotionally. That maturity changes financial destiny. Most people do not realize discipline compounds. Every intentional purchase, every disciplined month, every avoided impulse, every strategic decision strengthens financial stability slightly, and repeated discipline creates freedom over time. You cannot build financial peace while constantly feeding emotional impulses. Impossible, because impulsiveness destroys consistency, and consistency creates wealth. The strongest people simplify their lives intentionally, simplify spending, distractions, unnecessary pressure, ego purchases, emotional habits, because simplicity protects freedom. There are people listening to this right now who secretly crave peace more than luxury, peace without debt panic, emotional spending, financial stress, lifestyle pressure. And deep down, they know discipline is the bridge to that peace. Most people think discipline feels restrictive, but lack of discipline is what creates prison. Prison through debt, pressure, instability, financial anxiety, emotional chaos. Discipline creates escape. The strongest financially free people often move quietly for years, quietly investing, building, sacrificing, delaying gratification, protecting their future. And eventually, that quiet discipline creates loud freedom. There is something emotionally powerful about finally becoming reliable to yourself financially, reliable enough to budget intentionally, to stop emotional spending, to think long-term, to protect your future consistently. That reliability rebuilds identity deeply. Most people wait too long to become disciplined financially.
Too long to simplify life, reduce pressure, stop performing wealth, build stability intentionally, and eventually years disappear inside emotional spending cycles. Every disciplined decision rebuilds freedom slightly. Every resisted impulse, every avoided comparison, every intentional investment, every simplified habit moves you closer to financial peace. That repetition changes destiny. The strongest version of wealth is not luxury, it is freedom. Freedom without panic, without pressure, without emotional spending, without survival anxiety. That freedom feels different emotionally. One day, you will either thank yourself for becoming disciplined early, or you will realize you spent years chasing temporary pleasure while your future quietly suffered. Because freedom is built through discipline, not appearances. There is one final truth in this chapter. Discipline creates financial freedom quietly, through consistency, emotional control, intentional spending, patience, delayed gratification. And the people who ultimately become financially free are usually the people who finally decided, I no longer want money to impress people. I want money to protect my peace.
Chapter 9. Stop performing wealth. At some point, you must ask yourself a difficult question. Are you building wealth or performing it? Because those are completely different lives. One creates freedom, stability, peace, ownership, long-term security. The other creates pressure, anxiety, comparison, emotional exhaustion, financial instability. And many people spend years confusing the two. Let's slow this down. There are people listening to this right now who feel trapped by the image they created. Trapped because they feel pressure to constantly upgrade, impress, maintain appearances, prove success publicly, even while internally they feel financially exhausted. Performance culture is destroying people quietly, because modern culture rewards looking successful more than being financially stable. And emotionally vulnerable people become addicted to visibility. Most people are not building lives anymore. They are building performances. Performances designed for social media, public approval, admiration, validation, status. And performances are emotionally expensive. There is something psychologically exhausting about constantly needing your life to appear impressive, because now your peace depends on what people think they see. Some people are not buying products, they are buying applause, buying reactions, attention, admiration, perceived status, and emotional dependence on applause creates financial chaos. Many people secretly fear looking ordinary, fear repeating clothes, simplifying life, moving quietly, not appearing successful. And ego turns simplicity into emotional discomfort. That is why some people remain financially trapped for years, because emotionally they cannot let go of the... Chapter 9. Stop performing wealth. At some point, you must ask yourself a difficult question. Are you building wealth or performing it? Because those are completely different lives. One creates freedom, stability, peace, ownership, long-term security. The other creates pressure, anxiety, comparison, emotional exhaustion, financial instability. And many people spend years confusing the two. Let's slow this down. There are people listening to this right now who feel trapped by the image they created. Trapped because they feel pressure to constantly upgrade, impress, maintain appearances, prove success publicly, even while internally they feel financially exhausted. Performance culture is destroying people quietly, because modern culture rewards looking successful more than being financially stable. and emotionally vulnerable people become addicted to visibility. Most people are not building lives anymore. They are building performances. Performances designed for social media, public approval, admiration, validation, status. And performances are emotionally expensive. There is something psychologically exhausting about constantly needing your life to appear impressive, because now your peace depends on what people think they see. Some people are not buying products, they are buying applause, buying reactions, attention, admiration, perceived status, and emotional dependence on applause creates financial chaos. Many people secretly fear looking ordinary, fear repeating clothes, simplifying life, moving quietly, not appearing successful. And ego turns simplicity into emotional discomfort. That is why some people remain financially trapped for years, because emotionally they cannot let go of the performance. The dangerous thing about performing wealth is that eventually you begin living for perception instead of reality. And perception does not pay bills. Perception does not create peace. Perception does not build freedom. Most financially stressed people are trying to maintain a version of success that their reality cannot comfortably sustain. And internally, that pressure feels heavy. There are people listening to this right now who secretly panic before salary dates, repayment deadlines, monthly expenses, financial obligations, but still feel pressure to look financially successful publicly. That emotional contradiction destroys peace, deeply. The strongest wealthy people often become invisible emotionally. Invisible because they no longer need strangers to validate their lifestyle. And emotional independence changes financial behavior completely. Most people think wealth is about visibility, but real wealth is often quiet. Quiet investing, saving, ownership, discipline, patience. And quiet discipline creates loud freedom later. There is something psychologically powerful about no longer needing your purchases to communicate your worth. Because now you stop performing and begin protecting your future intentionally. Some people are financially trapped because they built their identity around appearances, around brands, luxury, image, public perception, status culture. And identity-based spending becomes emotionally addictive. Most people do not realize financial freedom often requires emotional detachment from validation. Detachment from applause, comparison, attention, public approval. And emotionally detached people spend differently. The strongest financially disciplined people often become comfortable being underestimated, because they understand real wealth does not need constant explanation.
Chapter 10. Build a life you don't need to fake. At some point, you become tired. Tired of performing success, chasing appearances, pretending financially, comparing yourself constantly, carrying pressure silently. And eventually, you begin craving something deeper than luxury. You begin craving peace, real peace. Let's slow this down. There are people listening to this right now who secretly do not want more applause. They want stability, emotional calmness, financial breathing room, freedom, simplicity, a future that feels secure, because deep down they are exhausted from performance. Many people built lives designed to impress others, but not lives designed to protect themselves. And eventually, that imbalance becomes emotionally painful. The dangerous thing about fake success is that it disconnects you from reality slowly. You begin making decisions based on appearances, social pressure, comparison, validation, emotional ego, instead of peace, discipline, stability, long-term freedom.
and emotionally reactive living creates financial suffering. There is something psychologically exhausting about constantly needing your life to look impressive, because now your happiness depends on other people's perception, and perception is unstable. Most people are secretly trying to avoid feeling unsuccessful, so they overspend, overperform, compare constantly, chase luxury emotionally, and deep down, they are searching for emotional worth externally. But external appearances cannot heal insecurity, lack of discipline, emotional emptiness, fear of inadequacy. Those are internal battles. The strongest financially free people eventually stop trying to prove themselves publicly, because emotional maturity changes priorities. Now they value peace, freedom, ownership, stability, emotional calmness, more than applause, attention, admiration, image. That shift changes everything. Some people built lifestyles that secretly punish them daily, punish them through debt, anxiety, pressure, emotional exhaustion, survival stress. And deep down, they know the image is costing too much. There are people listening to this right now who secretly miss simplicity, miss financial breathing room, emotional calmness, freedom from comparison, peace without performance, because emotionally they are tired of pretending. The dangerous thing about performance culture is that it rewards visibility instead of emotional well-being. People admire luxury, expensive lifestyles, public success displays, but they rarely see sleepless nights, financial pressure, emotional panic, silent anxiety, and hidden suffering. Many people destroy many people quietly. Most people do not realize real wealth feels emotionally different. Real wealth feels calm, stable, intentional, quiet, emotionally grounded. Fake wealth feels pressured, performative, emotionally reactive, comparison-driven. That emotional difference matters deeply. There is something psychologically powerful about building a life that allows you to breathe peacefully, a life without constant financial panic, emotional overspending, performance pressure, image addiction. That peace changes people internally. The strongest financially disciplined people often simplify their lives intentionally, not because they lack ambition, but because they understand complex lifestyles create complex pressure, and simplified living protects peace. Many people are not financially poor first, they are emotionally dependent on validation first. And validation addiction creates overspending, comparison, lifestyle inflation, financial instability. That cycle traps people for years. Most people are emotionally afraid to stop performing wealth, afraid because they built their identity around appearances, and letting go of the image feels emotionally uncomfortable initially. There are moments where your future self is begging you internally, please build a life that actually protects us, begging you to stop performing, to stop comparing yourself, to stop emotional spending, to start building stability intentionally, because freedom matters more than image. The strongest wealthy people often become emotionally detached from status culture, detached enough to move quietly, to ignore trends, to stop proving themselves publicly, to prioritize long-term peace. That emotional independence creates financial power. Some people spend their entire lives trying to look successful without ever becoming internally peaceful, and eventually the emotional emptiness becomes impossible to ignore. Most people underestimate how emotionally draining performance becomes. Draining because you must constantly maintain appearances, keep upgrading, compete socially, impress people, avoid looking behind, and emotional exhaustion quietly grows. The strongest financially free people focus more on ownership than appearance.
ownership of their time, their peace, their future, their financial stability, their emotional freedom. That mindset changes destiny. There is something emotionally freeing about finally admitting, I no longer want to build a life designed for attention. That honesty changes everything, because now you stop performing and begin living intentionally. Most people are chasing the image of freedom, but financially disciplined people chase actual freedom. Freedom without debt panic, without emotional overspending, without constant pressure, without survival anxiety. That freedom feels different emotionally. The strongest people stop asking, how can I look successful, and begin asking, how can I feel peaceful? That question creates transformation. You cannot build lasting financial peace while constantly feeding ego. Impossible. Because ego creates impulsiveness, comparison, emotional spending, performance addiction, and emotionally reactive living destroys stability slowly. Many people secretly know their lifestyle is unsustainable, but emotionally, they fear letting go of the image. That fear keeps people trapped for years. The strongest financially disciplined people become comfortable being misunderstood because they understand quiet progress matters more than public approval. There is something psychologically mature about building quietly saving, investing, simplifying life, reducing pressure, protecting your future, because quiet discipline creates loud freedom eventually. Every disciplined financial decision rebuilds your life slightly. Every intentional purchase, avoided impulse, simplified habit, emotionally mature decision moves you closer to peace, stability, and freedom. That repetition changes identity.
Most people wait too long to stop performing, too long to separate self-worth from appearance, simplify their lifestyle, stop emotional spending, build intentionally, and eventually, years disappear inside pressure. The strongest version of wealth is not expensive. It is peaceful. Peaceful enough to sleep calmly, to move quietly, to stop proving yourself, to live intentionally. That emotional peace becomes priceless. There are people listening to this right now who are finally realizing they do not actually want luxury. They want freedom, peace, stability, emotional calmness, ownership over their future. And deep down, they know performance will never give them that. One day, you will either thank yourself for building intentionally, or you will realize you spent years building a life designed to impress strangers while silently exhausting yourself internally. Because appearances always demand payment eventually. The strongest financially free people eventually understand one final truth. A peaceful life is more valuable than an impressive life. Because peace protects your mind, your future, your emotional health, your freedom, and emotionally protected people build stronger futures. There is one final truth in this chapter. The goal was never to look rich. The goal was to become free. Free from pressure, debt, comparison, emotional spending, validation addiction. And the people who ultimately build lasting wealth are usually the people who finally decided, I no longer want a life that looks successful. I want a life that finally feels peaceful.
Wealth is quiet. At the beginning of this audiobook, you may have thought this was about money, but it was never only about money. It was about identity, insecurity, discipline, emotional control, validation, peace, freedom. Because money does not only expose financial habits, money exposes who you are emotionally. Let's slow this down one final time. There are people listening to this right now who are emotionally exhausted. not because they are lazy, not because they are incapable, but because they built lives around pressure, appearances, comparison, emotional spending, financial performance, and eventually the performance became heavier than the peace. Most people never intended to become financially trapped. They simply made repeated emotional decisions. One impulsive purchase, comparison-based upgrade, lifestyle inflation, ego-driven expense at a time. And slowly, those repeated behaviors became financial identity. The terrifying thing about financial self-destruction is that it often looks impressive externally. Nice clothes, luxury lifestyle, expensive image, beautiful social media presence. But internally, there is anxiety, pressure, debt, exhaustion, silent panic. And many people are suffering quietly behind appearances. This audiobook was never teaching that money is evil. Money is a tool, but emotionally immature behavior turns tools into destruction. Most people are not poor because they never earned money. Many people are poor because they never developed discipline. Discipline to delay gratification, resist emotional spending, stop performing wealth, protect their future, move intentionally. And discipline changes financial destiny. The strongest financially free people often become emotionally quiet because they no longer need applause, validation, comparison victories, public proof of success, because real wealth feels different emotionally. Real wealth feels calm, stable, intentional, emotionally grounded, peaceful. Fake wealth feels loud, pressured, performative, emotionally reactive, unstable. That emotional difference changes entire lives. There are people listening to this right now who secretly crave peace more than luxury. Peace without debt panic, without financial pressure, without emotional overspending, without comparison addiction. And deep down, they know peace is more valuable than appearances. Most people are emotionally addicted to looking successful, but emotionally mature people become obsessed with becoming free, free from survival anxiety, performance pressure, emotional spending, validation addiction. That freedom changes everything internally. The strongest financially disciplined people often become quieter than expected because their focus shifted from being admired to being protected. Protected financially, protected emotionally, protected mentally. That mindset creates long-term stability. There is something psychologically exhausting about constantly trying to maintain an image that strangers admire, social media rewards, people envy, while internally your peace slowly disappears. Most people do not realize ego is expensive, very expensive, because ego constantly demands upgrades, visibility, attention, validation, comparison victories, and emotional ego quietly destroys financial peace. The strongest financially disciplined people become emotionally detached from status culture, lifestyle competition, public validation, because emotionally detached people make clearer decisions. There are moments where your future self is begging you internally, please stop sacrificing us for appearances, begging you to simplify life, to move quietly, to stop emotional spending, to build freedom intentionally, because peace matters more than performance. Most people spend years trying to look wealthy, without realizing real wealth often looks quiet. Quiet because real wealth is usually busy investing, building, protecting, simplifying, thinking long-term. That quiet discipline creates loud freedom eventually. There is something psychologically freeing about no longer needing your purchases to communicate your worth, because now you stop performing financially and begin living intentionally. Many people secretly know their lifestyle is draining them, draining their peace, their future, their emotional stability, their freedom. But emotionally, they fear letting go of the image. That fear keeps many people trapped for years. The strongest financially free people often become comfortable being misunderstood, comfortable because they are building something deeper than appearances, something sustainable, something peaceful. Most people think wealth means luxury, but emotionally mature people understand wealth means options. Options to breathe, rest, choose differently, avoid panic, protect your future. And freedom through options changes life completely. You cannot build lasting peace while constantly feeding ego, impulsiveness, comparison, emotional spending. Impossible, because emotionally reactive habits destroy stability slowly. The strongest financially disciplined people protect their future daily through intentional spending, emotional control, patience, consistency, quiet discipline, and repeated discipline create powerful lives. Every financial decision shapes identity slightly. Every impulsive purchase, intentional investment, emotional expense, disciplined sacrifice changes who you become financially. That process never pauses. There is something psychologically powerful about finally deciding, I no longer want money to make me look important. I want money to help me live peacefully, think clearly, and protect the life I am building quietly. That sentence changes everything, because now you stop building a performance and begin building a life, a real life. Most people wait too long to become financially honest with themselves, too long to confront emotional spending, to simplify life, to stop comparing themselves, to stop performing wealth, and eventually years disappear inside pressure. The strongest version of wealth is not loud, it is calm, calm enough to sleep peacefully, to think clearly, to stop proving yourself, to move intentionally. That emotional calmness becomes priceless. One day you will meet the results of your financial habits, the results created through discipline or impulsiveness, intentionality or emotional spending, peace or performance, and that future will reveal everything. Most people are chasing the appearance of success, but emotionally mature people chase the feeling of freedom, because freedom protects the mind, the future, emotional health, long-term peace. That protection changes lives deeply. The goal was never to look rich. The goal was to stop living under pressure, to stop performing, overspending, comparing, emotionally escaping through money, and to finally build a life that feels stable internally. Wealth is quiet. Quiet because real freedom does not need applause. It does not need constant visibility, public approval, emotional validation, because people who are truly free usually have nothing left to prove. There is one final truth in this audiobook. The people who ultimately become financially free are usually the people who finally decided, I no longer want money to make me look important. I want money to help me live peacefully, think clearly, and protect the life I am building quietly.
If this message spoke to you, share it. Subscribe. Keep listening.